Hello, I'm Daniela. In today's video, I'm going to show how I make a photo prop to use to photograph my artwork so that it shows in a really flattering way. Now the prop is designed to complement the artwork, and it's something that I can reuse and use over and over again. And I store it in my prop box, which you can see right behind me, where I have all these little props that I've made or collected that I want to use in my work. Now I purposely try and make my props neutral and reusable. And they don't necessarily have to be neutral, but in today's video we're going to make pearls, which can be used for a number of ways to enhance my photographs. The pearls are glossy and shiny and very beautiful, but they're also subtle, and it's a very interesting effect. I can also make a similar piece without using pearls, but using large hole beads, or even children's large hole beads to teach them how to string. I just think sometimes you can find them in your travels and they're very interesting and they make unique elements that you can add to your photograph. Now when you photograph your work, you either do it for posterity, for your own information, to promote your work, like on Instagram, or to sell your work. And sometimes just staging the scene where you have your artwork is very effective. I like to use the props so that they complement but not distract from the artwork. And I can photograph my stitching pieces or my paintings or sculptures or anything really. So this is my technique. So to make my knotted garland here, which I use as a photo prop, I really like it with pearls. It can be used with anything that you could thread. You could thread something as simple as acorns, or just think about Christmas time where people used to thread popcorn onto string. But I like the variation of pearls with either twine or something rustic, because the contrast between the elegant pearls and the rustic textured thread I find to be really interesting. And it's a subtle prop. It's nothing that really competes with your main attraction, your subject matter. So there are lots of ways you can do this. In today's video, I'm going to use baker's twine, which is similar to twine. It doesn't have all these little hairy pieces here. It's more of a cotton fabric as opposed to this twine, which if you look really closely has all these little hairs sticking out of it. But it's totally an option. You can also use linen thread here because it's nice and tough and it's flexible. Or this waxed linen cord as well, and you just can buy it in a spool. You can even use sewing thread if you want. I'm not sure how durable it would be. I guess if you chose a quilter's thread or something, and you can always double it, you'd get a nice, thick, sturdy result. Now, if I wanted to make it festive for, like, say, the Christmas season, this red and white twine with the pearls would be a nice addition. And maybe I'll try that at some point. But there are lots of options. The two things you have to remember are you have to be able to thread it through some type of needle. This is a large-eyed needle here. And it has to be small enough that it can fit through the pearls that you're going to string. So that's basically the only criteria that you need. So I'm going to take a good length of this baker's twine because I know that every time I make a knot, it uses some of the thread. So I always cut it longer than I need. So I have a very long thread here. Now I'm going to make a knot at the bottom, but I'm going to leave a good 6 to 8 inches left over, and that just gives me something to work with if I want to do something to the end or move my thread around. It's just kind of a safety measure for me. It's not necessary to do. You can just knot it wherever you have the ending. And so from here, I'm just going to go about threading a pearl onto this long piece of thread. And I have an assortment here of larger pearls and smaller pearls. And at quick glance, I have about a 2-to-1 ratio of smaller pearls to larger pearls, so that will dictate my stringing pattern. On this one, for the most part, I did a larger pearl and 2 small pearls, which is what we're going to use, but there are some areas where I just did every other pearl a different size. So I'm going to start with my smaller pearl, and I just thread that on. So I thread that pearl all the way down to the end. And now I'm going to make a knot, just a simple knot where I make a loop and I feed that pearl and the tail through the loop. Now it's a little annoying at first because the tail is so long, and then I just gently pull to make a knot on the other side of that pearl. It doesn't have to be perfectly against it. There is a little give here. And then I'll just come back in and string another pearl. all the way down the length of my thread, just like that. And then I'll feed both of those pearls and the end through that thread. And again, I just gently glide the knot down closest to that pearl. And now it's time for a larger bead. So I'll thread that through. Again, I pull it all the way down the length. I make my loop and I feed all the beads I've already strung and the tail through that loop. So as you can see, that loop starts to get bigger just to be feasible to fit all the beads that I've already added. And I just continue on the length of this. Now I'm going to continue the pattern of a small bead, and a large bead with a knot in between. And I'll just do it until I use up the beads. As for what size I go for, I like it to be at least a foot long. If it's a little longer, that's totally fine because that gives me a lot to work with. Usually when I'm photographing and using this as a prop, I only need to go just a little past the object I'm photographing. And for the most part, the largest object I photograph tends to be about a foot long. So obviously there'll be exceptions to that rule, but that's the approximate length I need at 12 to 14 inches. Again, if I have more beads and more resources, like I have enough twine that I've cut, I'll just continue to thread until I don't have any more beads to thread. And you can use any type of bead. You just have to keep in mind that the whole of your bead has to accommodate the thread that you're using. I like to keep my knots just a little bit of distance away from my beads that I'm stringing, and this gives give. This allows me to bend this rope of beads. So if I really want my beads to stay in place, I'll put 2 knots, or sometimes even 3 knots, separating them. Basically, I need the knot to be big enough to hold the bead in place. Just takes a little more labor, but the result is definitely worth it. So now I call this a garland because it can obviously be hung as a garland. It's not quite as long as the Christmas garland, the 6 feet long or 8 feet long or 12 foot long Christmas garland that you use, but it's the same premise. It's just a simple drape that you can use to really enhance the looks of something. So I'll continue to thread and knot beads, these faux pearls, onto this string, and it's a little slow work, but it's also quite enjoyable to have that resource at the end. I can make my loop, and to really help secure it, I can take either a pencil or even just the needle I'm using and use that to help move that knot to where I want it. And it just goes slowly. This way you don't secure anything that you can't undo. And if your knot is too far from where you want it, if it's loose, it's easy enough to just pull apart and just move down to where you want it. Just continue along. Now, because I like large whole beads, and they don't have to be super large, just large enough to be able to thread a decent embroidery needle through the twine or the string I'm going to use, I find a lot of these beads where they have children's crafts kits. Sometimes they're made of wood, sometimes they're plastic beads. These are just pearls, but whatever I like the look of, that's what I'll use, and I'll make a string of them to use as my props. And so I have a big prop box, and I can fit these in there, and when I need a prop to really enhance some of the artwork that I've created, I can just go to that prop box and find something. And I tend to stick to colors. Some are neutral, some are primary, but what I really do, what really determines it, is if I really just like the look of the bead or the bauble that I'm using. I find it very relaxing to do this. This is a great activity to do when you're just sitting down, you have some creative energy, you want to use it and have something done that you can use in the future for your work. You can do this in front of the television if you're somebody who likes to watch TV. It's easy enough to do in a room if somebody else is reading or just chatting with you. It doesn't require a lot of brain power. And there's really no mistakes. And even if you make a mistake, it's not a big deal. It's something as simple as just stringing a bead. Sometimes the knots aren't large enough and they will go right through the bead. But for this project, that's okay. I'm not really worried. This is not a piece of jewelry, and I can always just move them. If I'm concerned, I'll just make a double knot. It's one of the reasons I like using twine, is because it gets very bulky anytime you fold it on itself. And the butcher's twine, being a cotton, tends to really fade away. It's a very soft material. So I like using the pearls because they can be elegant or rustic. They're easy to find, and they're a little unusual. So now it's taken me about 25 minutes to do all this. I have my strand of beads, which is way over 12 inches, which is terrific. I have a few extra small beads, and I can either thread my needle and feed some on the end here, just to even it out, or just keep these beads left over in my stash. Now in some areas, there's a lot of space between the beads because I didn't do a perfect job. I don't mind that look. I like that rustic look. It's a lot of fabric knots here from the threading, and then the pearls. So it's the really shiny and glossy pearl and the really interesting rustic knot. So this works for me. So I wanted to show you some variations on this technique. Here's the original that I had of the garland with the knotted twine in between each bead. Here's the bead with the baker's twine, the little pearls that we did today in the video. And then here are just some wooden beads, again from the kids section, where I just threaded them onto a piece of twine. I didn't knot them in between. This gives me a lot of leeway where I can move the beads as I need them, but it also gives me enough flexibility that I can make a winding little garland here for my prop. And then I did another one where I took children's beads that were painted. These are large hole beads, and I strung them on some elastic, and they have a little give. Now I can wrap them around in different ways and use them this way. And usually the kids' beads come in a set of various colors, so I was able to make a number of strands. And again, with all these primary colors, I can use them quite a bit in my work, and that helps to fill my prop box with all these different colors that I can use on my work. If you go to my Instagram account, you'll see a lot of these in use throughout the years. So I hope you found that useful, just to string some pearls on whatever thread you had, whether it's baker's twine, beading wire, or elastic. You can really use anything, and you can also use any sort of beads as long as you can feed your thread, whatever that might be, right through it. I hope you found this useful and you use it to photograph your artwork. Thanks for joining me today.